This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and a warm welcome to Global Business, coming to you live from Kenya's capital. I am Peninah Karibe. Let's begin with a look at the markets. The JSE posted sharp and broad-based losses today in line with global markets, with investors wary about escalating trade conflict between the US and China. Amid broad-based losses, diversified miners fared the worst on the JSE, weighed down by a sharp drop in oil prices. Coming up on the show tonight. Uganda opens bids for its second oil bloc. Business leaders seek innovative ways of tapping the potential of unbanked population in Africa. And EU leaders discuss a possible future without Britain at a summit in Romania. Starting off in Uganda, the country has launched a second round of competitive bidding for 5 oil exploration blocks covering a total of 4,928 square kilometers in Albertine Graben. The government expects to issue exploration licenses and sign deals with the successful firms by December 2020. Uganda launched its first oil block auction in 2015, covering 6 exploration areas measuring 2,674 square kilometers. Australia's Armour Energy Limited and Nigeria's Oranto Petroleum went on to sign production sharing agreements with the government after the first auction. Interested firms and consortia are expected to submit applications within a period of 6 months after the announcement of the round. In Libya, the internationally recognized government has suspended the operations of 40 foreign firms, including French oil giant Total. According to the government, the firm's licenses had expired. Total pumps more than 1 million barrels of oil a day in Libya. Ties have been strained between Tripoli's government of national accord and the French government due to France's support of General Khalifa Haftar. The decision to suspend the firms comes after the Prime Minister of the Tripoli-based government, Fayez al-Sarraj, met with President Emmanuel Macron. Following the meeting, Macron called for a ceasefire. France said it viewed the eastern-based military commander Khalifa Haftar as a key player in rebuilding Libya. Haftar's troops have been trying to take control of Tripoli but have faced a counter-offensive from troops aligned with the Tripoli-based government. Over to South Africa now, where the final tally of the election results could be delayed following allegations of double voting. The Independent Electoral Commission has announced an audit to ascertain the extent of the fraud. This is the 6th election since the end of apartheid in 1994. The ruling ANC has taken a commanding lead of the national vote tallied so far. Here's CGTN's Alexandra Majala with more on that story.
Millions of South Africans have been glued to the media as they follow up on vote tallying a day after casting their ballots. Many young voters hope for change and an overhaul of the distribution of resources.
Hopes would be jobs, for the people that's unemployed. Yeah, I hope they get something after the elections.
We experiencing poverty, we don't have jobs, those kind of things, So I'm hoping that they'd give us that, give us jobs, stop corruption, which is the main concern of South Africa.
Unemployment, crime, corruption and poor public services are at an all-time high. This has become a concern for the young voters.
Changing amenities and distribution of resources evenly throughout the country, which meaning by saying like where the poor get more resources, and just I feel like South Africa should be a better place.
The governing African National Congress is on course to retain leadership and once again has promised to address the issues, but not all are convinced.
My vote is going to bring the changes in this country. We are tired of those crooks in the ANC where they don't even do us anything.
The Electoral Commission of South Africa has indicated that nearly 27 million people registered to vote. This represents about 75% of the eligible population. However, about 9.8 million eligible voters did not register. Of those, about 6 million are under 30 years old.
My vote has to make a change. That's what I'm expecting. Like everyone else, everyone's vote has to change things.
The ANC has been in power since 1994. Its biggest rivals are main opposition party, the Democratic Alliance, and leftist group, Economic Freedom Fighters. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
Marius Grobler is the head of campaigns at the Institute of Race Relations in South Africa and joins us live from Johannesburg to discuss this further with us. Marius, an opinion poll conducted by your firm last week showed the ANC would get 53% to 54% of the national vote. So far, is this projection reflected in the results?
Yes, it's pretty close to what we predicted. We said that the ANC would get 54%, and we built in a 3% margin of error. So that would mean it's actually we said the ANC would probably get between 51 and 57%. So that's the high end of our polling. So we think we've got it pretty much right on this.
There are reports of double voting in some areas. The IEC is now conducting an audit on how likely it is conducting an audit on this. How likely is this to tilt the results?
We don't think that the amount of double votes is actually that much. So although there'll probably be an audit, we don't think this will actually stop the results being announced over the weekend as they normally are. So we don't think this. There have been some problems with this election, more so than in previous elections in South Africa. We still don't think it's enough to cast doubt over the final results, which is going to show the ANC winning in the country in 8 out of the 9 provinces.
Now, the key issues in this election were unemployment, poverty and security, of course, among others. How is Ramaphosa going to tackle these issues, especially given the discontent voters have been having with the ANC?
Well, President Ramaphosa really has his work cut out for him. Economic growth in South Africa is very low at the moment. We have an appallingly high unemployment rate of close to 40%. So the president's really going to have to make some big changes as his term starts. There's going to have to be structural changes around the economy, but we're not sure that he'll be able to do that, and whether firstly, if he's got the political will, and whether if he'll have the backing of the ANC to make the necessary changes.
All right, so you've mentioned the country's economy. Of course, there's that critical issue of turning it around. Reforms at the state-owned enterprises and land ownership, very, very critical towards that issue of the economy. So are you convinced President Ramaphosa and his team will deliver on these issues?
No, it's going to be very difficult for the president. As I say, I'm not sure if firstly the political will exists and whether the president has the right people in his cabinet. We've seen in the ANC, people who go into parliament for the ANC are a lot of people who are involved in corruption and malfeasance in the past under the Zuma administration. A lot of these people are still on the ANC lists. A lot of those people are still in cabinet, and we're not sure if they'll be taken out of cabinet by the president going forward. And although the president's done some positive things on state-owned enterprises, the land reform issue is going to be a very difficult one for the president to resolve, and it could be that expropriation without compensation is implemented in the new administration, which would have dire consequences for South Africa's economy and for everybody who lives here.
And finally, Marius, do you expect major changes on the face of the ANC government after the elections?
No, I don't think so. I think the ANC government is probably going to carry on. I mean, although it's lost some support now in this current election, I don't think there's anything that the ANC will think it needs to make any major changes to how it runs the country. There were some people who thought it would lose, including us, that it would lose Gauteng, which is the most populous and most important province economically. But the ANC seems to be holding a majority of about 51, 52%. So overall, this election's actually been people of South Africa saying they're fairly happy with the ANC government. So I don't think there'll be any major changes going forward under President Ramaphosa. So we can probably expect the economy to continue growing at around 1%, which is far too low for what we need to get rid of the very high amounts of unemployment and poverty we have in this country.
Marius Grobler in Johannesburg, thank you. Egyptian Minister of Planning announced the inflation figures for the last 9 months have averaged 14%. Inflation for April stood at 13.8%, and that's down from 14.2% the month before. Esther Hakim looks at how the Egyptian government has been tackling the inflation issues during the latest economic reforms.
The current inflation figures have shown a considerable improvement than the last few years.
Before 2011, it was fine to postpone the economic reforms because there was an inflow of foreign currency. Exports gained $30 billion while tourism more than $10 billion a year. After the 2011 uprising, exports dropped by $20 billion and tourism revenue fell to only $3 billion. The central bank used up the foreign reserves to sustain the Egyptian pound, but by 2015 the economy was on the brink of bankruptcy.
The government had to float the pound in 2016. Inflation shot up to 35% and 45% for food items. The government embarked on social services projects and food subsidy increases to soften the burden of price hikes on the majority low-income population, and is now working hard to push inflation further down.
The solution for the inflation issue is to increase industrialization and production. There must be more exports to reduce inflation rates. The government is providing necessary facilities for foreign investments and businesses. The World Bank and IMF have commended these efforts.
The government says it's targeting inflation to drop to 10% by the next fiscal year and to reach 6 or 7% by the year 2020-2021. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
In the corporate headlines, Anglo Gold Ashanti is looking at options to dispose of its remaining assets in South Africa. The firm, which currently employs 6,000 people, is looking to focus on higher returns and investment opportunities elsewhere. Mining companies in the country are facing volatile labor relations, rising costs, regulatory disruptions and technical challenges. African operator group MTN has published its quarterly trading update, which saw its revenue growth target increase by 10%. The service revenue increased by 5.6% year-over-year in South Africa, with data revenue increasing by 3.1%. Data revenue saw a 3.1% increase, with voice revenue declining by 35.7%. The 5.1% decrease in prepaid service revenue for MTN South Africa is attributed to the recent bundle price reductions and a challenging economic environment. MTN reported a 4.9% net loss in the number of subscribers on its network over the first quarter of 2019. Australian mining firm Base Resources is seeking to expand its Kwale mine in Kenya to a new site with an estimated resource of 171 million metric tons. This move could extend the company's local operations beyond 2024, earning royalties at a rate of 2.5% of the value of export sales. The firm recorded a 31.2% decline in the value of exports in the quarter ended March on the back of reduced production. And Emirates Airlines profit fell 43.7% to $626.1 million as soaring fuel costs and a strong dollar took a toll on earnings while passenger growth stalled. The company reported a 69% fall in net profit to $237 million in the year to March 31st. Meanwhile, the number of passengers rose 0.2% to 58.6 million, while cargo increased 1.4% to 2.7 million tons. And that's a look at your corporate headlines. You're watching Global Business. Still ahead. Business leaders seek innovative ways of tapping the potential of unbanked population in Africa. And Egyptian car makers seek to regain their status as Africa's hub of motor vehicle assembly.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business. Only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why.
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Peninah Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
I'm reporting from Nairobi City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference.
Business leaders from across Africa are in London this week for an investment conference focused on promoting development on the continent. The potential to tap into Africa's unbanked population is huge, with 70% of activity still in the informal sector. CGTN's Terry Wangari reports.
Business leaders from around 40 countries are taking part in the Africa Financial Services Investment Conference. The event is focused on developing financial services and innovative products for Africans.
When you look at Africa and its economies, it's a patchwork of different countries pushing and pulling in different directions. So the thing we're most interested in is areas where it's underpenetrated and underserved. The fortune at the bottom of the pyramid, the people that aren't in the middle income class, kind of the lower and the lower middle, is where there's a lot of kind of innovation in banking services. So that's the type of innovation that we like, kind of at that affordable price point, giving them convenience so they don't keep the money under the mattress, they can transact from their phones, and it's a quality product.
South Africa, Seychelles and Kenya are widely seen as the top markets in Africa in terms of access to financial services. With the development of mobile money services like M-Pesa, which initially started as a SIM card-based money transfer application. It's given many Kenyans without access to the formal banking network a way to become financially connected.
Well, what makes me happy is that the African consumer is very happy to embrace technology and is really pushing people like ourselves and other players on the continent to be as innovative as we can be to serve them.
And it's not just local partnerships. As Britain prepares to leave the European Union, it's looking to develop stronger ties in other parts of the world.
Finance is the lifeblood of any developing economy and developed economy, and so finance from the UK into Africa is going to be a really important part.
The potential to tap into Africa's unbanked population is largely unexplored. If the continent wants to reach its potential, it needs to continue to innovate its financial services while at the same time focus on accessibility for all Africans. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
For decades, Egypt has been assembling cars for some of the world's biggest brands. After a period of a slowdown, Cairo is quickly gaining back its potential with national plans to become a hub for Africa. Our correspondent Adel Mahrui visited Arab American vehicles who have been producing four-wheel drive vehicles for more than 4 decades.
This is one of Egypt's biggest and most advanced car manufacturing plants. Here, 6 models of Toyota and Jeep's four-wheel drive vehicles are getting assembled, mainly for the local market. Recently, Egypt has been developing its automobile industry, as the nation hopes to attract world manufacturers here to produce for Africa and the Arab world.
We produce models for international brands. They protect their brand by all means, so they ensure our production quality matches the world-class manufacturing standards. 100% of our cars get tested in our on-road and off-road trucks. The companies we produce for have praised our quality. In their crash tests to our vehicles, we are proud to say we scored among their top factories in the world.
في جزء منه off-road, في جزء on-road. تعمل عندنا crash test.
It's a semi-automated factory. The painting chambers are fully automated, where the vehicle's body goes through 11 multi-layer electrostatic coating. Currently, the Egyptian local component is around 47%, with hopes to increase it in new models.
Our prime target is to boost local manufacturing. We fully support Egyptian spare parts producers. We work together to ensure that the quality produced here could exceed international component, which the mother company accepts.
The Arab American Vehicles Company was founded in 1977 primarily to produce Jeep's G8 vehicles. After successfully exporting this military-grade model, the company decided to use its additional production capacity for civilian production. This plant can produce up to 12,600 vehicles a year of 8 different models.
With Chrysler, we are negotiating introducing sedan and SUV models to satisfy local needs. We hope to move towards Africa. There is huge potential in the continent. We are also negotiating with big companies to enter the electric vehicles field.
Some of Egypt's new smart cities, like the new administrative capital, will exclusively allow electric vehicles to roam its streets. The government wants to be prepared with manufacturing arms like this one to cover most of the local need in electric vehicles.
This beehive has become a center equipped with some of the most advanced technologies in car manufacturing Egypt has seen. It is also a school inducing the market with skillful labor, which Egypt hopes could be the infrastructure in its plan to expand automobile industry in the country. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Stakeholders in Kenya's technology sector have raised concerns about the use of the data collected in the ongoing digital registration exercise. The 45-day process was launched by the government as a means of assembling the personal details of citizens and foreigners in one database. Technology experts, however, say in the absence of a data protection law, the information could be misused. Wilkis Tanyabo has the story.
At an administrative office in Nairobi, dozens line up, their identification documents in hand. This is the last week of registration for the National Integrated Identity Management System number in Kenya. Through the system, the government intends to collect individuals' personal information, such as biometric data like fingerprints, into one database. The aim, authorities say, is to enhance security, and Kenyans are rushing to meet the deadline.
It's
a good thing because they will put out information together. We'll have one identification document which will be easier to carry around in our wallets.
But Kenya's technology service providers harbor doubts about the safety of such information. In the last week, technology company Mozilla brought together government officials and IT stakeholders to discuss data protection and management. Kenya is yet to enact a data protection law, and without it, fears abound that the data collected could be abused.
We are also concerned how is it going to be stored? Because someone can just manipulate this particular data and use it against you. For example, you have to give details of the name of your spouse, your kids.
The concern here is, while we're collecting all of this data, we are not being told who is going to be storing it, where it's being stored, why it's being collected, why we need all of this really sensitive information, what are the security measures, to ensure that that it's not hacked. And the most concerning issue is that we are centralizing this data in one central place, meaning that it becomes a honeypot for any malicious actor to access.
Technology experts argue that only once the law is in place can the government guarantee the security of the data it holds. But there are 45 million people to register in 45 days, and the clock is ticking. And with just 8 days left to register, Kenyans are racing to get listed in the National Digital Register. Bulkisa Nyabwa, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Data protection is also a concern in the business. In 2017, e-commerce accounted for 6% of all purchases made in Kenya. In the last quarter of 2018, the volume of e-commerce transactions in Kenya done through mobile money services hit $17.8 billion, rising by 16.2% quarter on quarter. But all of this is happening despite the lack of legal protection for consumers or their data. A data protection bill is currently being debated to fix some of those problems, but does it go far enough? Earlier, CGTN's Romania spoke to Dr. Isaac Rattenberg. He is the director of Strathmore University's Center for Intellectual Property and IT Law, and he started by exploring how Kenya's data protection bill deals with consent and accountability.
You order a laptop, then obviously they have to get it to you. Obviously they have to take payment. So there are, and even though you didn't expressly say you can take my data and give it to those other people who are going to deliver it to me, that's an obvious carve out where data can be transferred. Mm-hmm. But there are quite a number of them in different laws across the world, and people are trying different ways of allowing for flexibilities in data.
When it comes to the right to correction, I mean, how do we bake protections into law against using that as a tool for censorship?
As with other laws, for example, in defamation, the truth should always be completely exonerating someone who wants to publish something. If something is absolutely true, it should, most data protection laws will allow it to stay on the record. Although there are certain cases such as criminal activity that are expunged from records and that sort of thing, those are specific carve-outs that we make. But from a data retention perspective, there's that aspect that it's true, so it should be there. On the other hand, one of the data protection principles is also that data that is obsolete should be deleted. So if for example, to get into this building, I had to give several pieces of identifying data.
Yeah.
That actually violates two principles. One is that they should only ask for a minimum amount of data about me. So one identification is fine. Two is too much, right? That they don't need to know who I am more than one way.
Yeah.
The second is, how long do they really need to keep a record of me entering a building? A year, maybe two. Beyond that, there's really not much of a reason, I would think, but we can disagree on the amount of time. But there should be a limit as to how long you can keep even factual data like that.
And even then the question becomes, okay, who holds it and what obligations do they have?
Absolutely. And one of the other principles of data protection is that you should not use data for anything other than the purpose it was collected. So a good way of explaining that one, for example, is you go to an airport, you show your passport, the immigration at that airport says, oh, we see your passport details, and we've been notified by your tax collector that you are behind on your taxes, so you can't leave the country. Okay, so that's a violation of data protection principles, because the immigration department is collecting your data, so they know who is entering and leaving the country, not to enforce tax collection, right? The tax collection should be done through the tax authority that goes through courts, and et cetera, et cetera.
That's an interesting point you raise, because it seems to me that we're moving towards a situation where a lot of these individual silos of data, right? So the immigration guys have one silo of your data, the tax guys have a separate one, the healthcare guys have a different one, the pension guys have a separate one. But it seems to me that a lot of these databases are now slowly being put together. And in that sort of context, if one arm of government can figure out anything else about you, I mean, that opens up a bit of Pandora's box, doesn't it?
It definitely does. It's not inherently bad to do that, but it does open up, as you said, Pandora's box. So first of all, when you centralize data, you open it up to, you essentially put a big red target on it for anyone who wants to steal data. If data is siloed into 6 or 7 different locations, the government is the only entity that has access to those 6 or 7 locations, right? So they don't need to really worry about access, but hackers or whoever would want to steal your information would need to access all of those different locations. When you centralize it, you make that data so much more valuable and a much bigger target. So you're actually increasing the likelihood of a hack, of a data loss, and the damage that will happen from a data loss. The other thing is, though, as I said before, you have to be very careful. As long as you have a framework, a legal framework that says, you can use this data for these reasons, there are legal processes that must be followed. As long as all of those are working, then centralized data in itself is not necessarily bad. But if you start getting creep into areas like the example I gave, then there is definitely that potential for abuse.
Let's head to Nigeria now, and the government plans to divest 60% of its stakes in the Bank of Agriculture to raise more than $700 million. The Bureau of Public Enterprises says the move is aimed at increasing farmers' access to cheap loans and giving farmers a voice in the bank. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam has more.
Femi Moses is a poultry farmer in the outskirts of Nigeria's capital, Abuja. He owns this farm of 5,000 birds and hopes to expand, but he can't find credit to do so. Commercial banks consider agri-businesses high risk, and they charge prohibitive interest rates, plus collateral security requirements puts off millions of farmers. So the plans to revigorate the Bank of Agriculture and let farmers have a say in its operations is an exciting news for him. Currently, the bank has very few branches and farmers see it as very detached. Femi would like that to change for the bank to make meaningful impact on agriculture.
Like this place, we have more than 50 poultry farmers around Buhari. If they set up a branch in Buhari and convince the farmers to bank with them, then they know the farmers, they will know the needs of the farmer, and they can easily reach the farmer. And that way too, the farmers can come to them. Most of the farmers, they are in need of intervention fund.
The Bank of Agriculture was established in 1972 to provide low-interest credit to farmers. But years of underfunding meant its ability to meet demand was outstripped, and currently it struggles to sustain itself. The Bureau for Public Enterprises, which oversees parastatals, wants farmers to buy 60% stakes in it. But selling a non-performing asset like the Bank of Agriculture means it will have to carry out an aggressive campaign to interest farmers.
The Bureau, has organized a sensitization, program that will take us around all the 6 geopolitical, zones to sensitize the farmers, particularly the crop associations, and also farmers, generally, on the need for them to patronize, the public offering of shares when, is, eventually, made.
Part of the problem that hobbled the Bank of Agriculture is the huge toxic loans it provided for farmers. For instance, the bank paid out more than $70 million to farmers in the past 3 years, and it struggles to recover it, which is why the plans to revamp it goes beyond raising the needed capital. The government is also exploring ways to make it sustainable. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
Tunisia's Environment Police was created in June 2017. The project aims to keep cities clean. Green Police is one of the most successful government agencies in the country that has improved the quality of life in cities. It is launching a national campaign in Ramadan. Adnan Shawashi has more.
After weeks of preparation and training, hundreds of Environment Police agents have been deployed to keep 24 regions clean.
Anything that disturbs citizens is our target. Our mission is noble. We are serving 12 million people to guarantee every Tunisian the right to a healthy environment.
Green Police agents have made a surprise visit to this restaurant. It is located in downtown Tunis. Some clients and local authorities have complained about recurrent food poisoning cases.
We've received many complaints from clients, shop owners and residents of this neighborhood. Now we have the undeniable proof that this restaurant does not respect food safety management and basic hygiene rules.
This building company was fined 1,000 dinars for disrespecting the environment. At this construction site, Green Police agents assert that the house owner had received several warnings from the municipality, yet he refused to comply with the law.
Sensitizing citizens and applying the law is our main mission. We do not tolerate any misbehavior.
The public opinion in Tunisia is divided on the efficiency of the environmental police force.
Green Police lacks means, but it is changing mentalities and improving the quality of life in Tunisia.
Green police is absent in my neighborhoods. It is using 4x4 pickups while it pretends to protect the environment.
Dealing with the proliferation of waste is one of the missions of the Environment Police Unit. This week, agents caught many people littering in public areas or dumping their rubbish out in nature.
According to the Prime Minister's office, Tunisia spends 1.2% of GDP on programs to protect the environment. Analysts say the government's initiatives and strong will show a privileged consideration given to environmental issues in the policies and development plans in the North African state. Aden Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
You're watching Global Business. Coming up. EU leaders discuss a possible future without Britain at a summit in Romania. And commodity prices in China accelerate faster in April compared to 1 year ago.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what do you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is high risk.
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
Let's have a look at the top stories of the day. South Africa's Electoral Commission says that it has established an urgent audit to check the extent of voter fraud. The decision was taken after the Commission met with political parties who raised concerns about the supposedly indelible ink being easy to remove. An unconfirmed number of people have been arrested in KwaZulu-Natal province for casting more than one ballot after removing their ink. Libya's internationally recognized government has suspended the operations of 40 foreign firms, including French oil giant Total. According to the government, the firm's licenses had expired. Total pumps more than 1 million barrels of oil a day in Libya. Tripoli's government of national accord and the French government have had strained ties due to France's support of General Khalifa Haftar. The decision to suspend the firms comes after the Prime Minister of the Tripoli-based government, Fayez al-Sarraj, met with President Emmanuel Macron. South Sudan's President Salva Kiir says forming a unity government in the country should be delayed by up to 1 year. This comes after the Council of Ministers of the East African Regional Body IGAD met in Juba this week and endorsed a 6-month extension period for the formation of a new government. And in Uganda, the UN Refugee Agency is preparing for a possible surge in refugee arrivals from the DRC and South Sudan. UNHCR says the deteriorating security situation in eastern DRC and the equatorial region of South Sudan is pushing more refugees across the border. And that's a wrap of our top stories today. European leaders are meeting in Romania to start the race for the top jobs in Brussels and sketch a future without Britain. The meeting is taking place just 2 weeks before the European Parliament elections that could usher in a new wave of populists to haunt EU decision-making. The 27 national leaders will meet in the Transylvanian city of Sibiu, but the future of the 2015 Iran deal, a high watermark for the EU diplomacy, will loom over the gathering, especially because Tehran said it would no longer respect limits on its nuclear activities. The move came a year after the US pulled out of the accord and reimposed sanctions and leaving the EU, which has fought tooth and nail to save the deal, in a difficult position. Let's cross over now to Bryony Williams, live in Brussels for more on this. Bryony, first off, what are some of the outcomes expected at that meeting?
Well, let's just remember that this meeting was scheduled as when Britain was due to be leaving the EU on March 29th. So when this was all planned, this was due to be a kind of rally together of all the leaders to set out the big agenda for the next 5 years, with the UK no longer being part of the European Union. So even though the UK is still in the European Union, those were the kind of big themes, and they kept with those today. So they were talking about growth, they were talking about security and the environment, how the EU over the next 5 years can tackle some of those big issues. Now, there was also a declaration from Romania. Now, I quote, it says that the EU is going to reaffirm our belief that united we are stronger in this increasingly unsettled and challenging world. We recognise our responsibility as leaders to make our union stronger for a brighter future, while recognising the European perspective of other European states. So, as I said, even though the UK is going to be leaving the EU bloc, and it was meant to have left by now, the message coming from this meeting is that we are still united. The European Union is here stronger than ever, and we are looking to the future. We're no longer looking back on the perhaps turmoil over the last 3 years we've had since voters in the UK chose to leave the European Union. Now, Jean-Claude Juncker here in Brussels, that's the European Commission president, said, you know, Brexit means Brexit, but until now we've had no Brexit. So I think they're trying to kind of focus less on Brexit and more on those big EU objectives that can be looked upon in the next 5 years.
All right, so the EU elections, they're coming up, and is the fear real that populist parties may gain more seats?
Well, I think that's a really hard question to answer. I mean, recently we had the Spanish elections where it was a very fragmented far right, but there was lots of speculation that the Vox party, which is a right-wing party in Spain, was going to really crack in to the mainstream parliament. And even though it did gain seats for the first time since the end of the Franco era, it didn't gain as many seats as people expected. So I think it's really hard to say whether, you know, the speculation will really amount into kind of seats in Parliament when we have those votes. I also think it's fair to say that within Europe, the right is fragmented. So on the left we have lots of parties across different member states aligning on some of their values and views, which gains a bit more momentum. But on the far right, it's still relatively fragmented across lots of member states. So it's really difficult to know whether those votes will push through or whether the rhetoric is very loud at the moment, but that campaigning doesn't turn into votes on the day. So I think we just have to wait and see with that.
And apart from discussing the future of the bloc, the meeting in Romania will shape the face of the EU leadership. Do we have hints on major changes?
Well, again, difficult answer, but what we do know, I'll just make sure I've got this correct, is that on May 28th in Brussels, there will be another European summit to kind of download what's happened at the parliamentary elections, but also to start the discussion process about the nominations for the heads of the EU institutions. As I've said, Jean-Claude Juncker has been speaking this week in Brussels, and he talked about coming to the end of his term, which finishes in autumn. So this could be a time where we do get a shift. There is going to be this meeting at the end of May where we'll look at some of those candidates, and I think we'll get a better idea of just perhaps where that movement might be later on this month.
All right, Bryony, thank you for that update. Bryony Williams live there in Brussels. Let's take a look at China's inflation numbers now. The National Bureau of Statistics has reported that prices went up at a faster pace in April than 1 year ago. The NBS says that commodity and food prices were among the main drivers of the increase in China's consumer price index.
China's consumer price index increased 2.5% in April from a year earlier, the fastest pace in 6 months. It also rebounded from minus 0.4 to 0.1% on a monthly basis. The increase came largely because of a rise in food prices, especially in fruits, vegetables, and pork. Pork prices kept rising both on month and on year as a growing swine fever epidemic originating in Africa hurt supplies, and is likely to support consumer prices going forward.
We expect consumer prices to go up faster this month because pork prices may keep rising as supply decreases. Northern China could experience a major shortage in live hogs in the coming month.
Meanwhile, the producer price index continued its recovery streak this year, rising 0.9% year-on-year at its fastest pace since the end of last year. The growth mainly stems from mining and refinery activities, but analysts say the momentum can barely be sustained as some sectors destock and trade frictions still exist.
Producer prices did rise faster in April, but the demand side hasn't been stabilized yet. So I believe going forward, policies would focus on supporting the demand side.
The analysts also point out that a pickup in PPI suggests that measures to head off external risks such as trade tensions with the United States are already working. Song Yangtian, CGTN.
Pakistan is in the final stages of negotiating an IMF bailout to the tune of $6 to $8 billion. Experts say the bailout is now more likely after Prime Minister Imran Khan reshuffled his economic team. Our correspondent Daniel Khan has more.
Prime Minister Imran Khan has removed the governor of the country's Reserve Bank, replacing him with an economist from the IMF, a move that has drawn wide range of criticism from opposition parties. But experts say the new team would be in a better position to translate the IMF's message to the government. Pakistan is in need of the financial aid to ease a balance of payment crisis triggered by high fiscal and current account deficits and shrinking foreign exchange reserves. Pakistan has already taken over a dozen IMF support packages since the 1980s. Pakistan is negotiating a loan package with the IMF. The talks were interrupted twice in the past over various disagreements, including the exchange rate policy. Some experts say the government had other options than going to the IMF.
IMF program has always been a political program. If you are standing on the right side of the US, the intensity, the nature and the design of the program will be much kinder. If you look at The economic conditions that this government inherited, I think it was in worse shape. There is no doubt about that. But the main challenge was the balance of payment challenge. And the balance of payment challenge emerged from astronomical rise in our import. So curbing import was the solution.
Imran Khan's government will announce its first budget in June. Experts say an IMF agreement could attract more stable financing by opening options for budget support from other lenders like World Bank and ADB, and improve access to bilateral sources and global capital markets. Danial Khan, CGTN, Islamabad.
More affordable luxury is turning into an unstoppable trend in the jewelry industry. It comes as an increasing number of domestic Chinese brands are offering designs to their customers at improved prices. Meijai has more.
Baoyi is a jewelry company based in Shenzhen, and every May it comes to Shanghai to attend one of the biggest jewelry exhibitions in China. This year its exhibits are quite different from the past. More simple and modern designs, and the price range is also more affordable.
We've done research through big data that affordable jewelries are very fashionable in their design, and they are not as large as traditional ones. Also, they tend to use mixed metal and stones. The price range is between 3,000 to 6,000 yuan.
Because of the smaller size and the use of mixed stones, the cost of making these items is lower than previous designs. But the investment into design itself is not cheap. Baoyi says it's up by 50% in 2018 compared to 1 year ago. We've asked around at the jewelry exhibition to find out what sort of budget customers assign to affordable luxury jewelry.
My budget is between 2,000 to 4,000 yuan. That'll be both good quality and design.
I change my accessories quite often, so I want them to be unique and not too expensive, so I can add to my collection from time to time. Usually it's around several thousand yuan.
In addition to young domestic brands, traditional Chinese brands are also catering to consumer trends, as they have found younger generations can be a strong force driving their growth. Lao Fengxiang is a century-old jewelry brand that is popular among elderly customers. But the company is aware of the purchasing power of younger generations, and so more than half of its new products last year were targeted at younger customers. The resulting sales were so good that it helped the company to maintain a 10% revenue increase last year, even though the general growth in the jewelry market slowed.
Although we are an old brand, we don't only sell gold. We've been enlarging our product portfolio. Last year, one of our new lines was amber jewelry. It used to be very popular among young customers, but there are not many good amber products on the market. So once it came out, sales were quite good.
The market potential for affordable luxury jewelries is growing. Research from Bain and Company shows that the market size will be expanding at about 6% for the coming years to reach 21 billion yuan in 2023, accounting for 30% of global sales. Mizai, ISIS for CGTN, Shanghai.
Let's look at the commodities market now, and oil prices fell today as an escalating trade battle between the US and China outweighed upward pressure from a surprise decline in US inventories of crude. Brent crude oil futures were at $69.72 a barrel by 8:14 a.m. GMT, and that's down 65 cents from the previous settlement and heading for their second consecutive weekly lows. Gold prices, however, held steady. Still ahead on Global Business. An eco-friendly shoe brand creates sizable footprint for the market in South Africa. eco-friendly South African shoe care brand has created a sizable footprint in the global market. Sneaker Lab has developed a unique range of water-based products to keep sport and other shoes in tip-top condition. Trendy sneakers have become a hit, especially among young people. The global footwear industry commands over $50 billion a year. CGTN's Julie Shire has more.
A status symbol, a valuable collector's item, or just a comfortable pair of running shoes. Sneakers have become an important accessory in the millennial wardrobe, but keeping them looking good can be a drag. An opportunity spotted by Sneaker Lab founder Joe Farah.
I wanted to start a business that would create jobs in South Africa. I had a passion for sneakers and streetwear, and the idea behind it was to create a brand that I could take globally.
Farah was intent on creating products that were compatible with nature and would preserve the look and feel of a good pair of sneakers.
Using chemicals and soaps and those kinds of things to clean and protect sneakers is just not the way to go. If we're going to be sustainable and we're going to, take care of our planet, we've got to think way into the future.
Taking care of your sneakers is like taking insurance for your sneakers. So when you take good care of your sneakers, they're going to last longer, and lasting longer means saving more money.
The company now exports the homegrown product to over 50 countries in Asia, Africa, Europe, and the US.
The first territory that we got into outside of that was Scandinavia, because they're very green conscious, and because we're the only green certified sneaker care brand in the world, the Scandinavians like jumped on it.
So let's see what the fuss is about.
Tsepo, thank you so much. Excellent. The wonderful thing about these products is that it took less than 5 minutes to get my shoes looking brand new, and they don't hurt the environment. Julie Shire, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Amid growing worldwide concern over deforestation, there's increasing demand for sustainable wood. In Brazil, a new focus is on eucalyptus, seen as a market substitute for some of the tropical woods found in the Amazon. CGTN's Paulo Cabral reports on the emergence of a new market for eucalyptus beyond the paper mills and China's key role.
These are planted forests of eucalyptus in the countryside of São Paulo state. They belong to Suzano Pulp and Paper, Brazil's biggest producer of cellulose, the raw material used to make paper products. The trees are mostly destined to feed the company's own pulp mills, but there is some excess. So it's preparing to enter a developing market of exporting the eucalyptus logs themselves. According to a survey from Forest to Market consultants using government data, eucalyptus log exports grew by over 120% from 2017 to 2018, reaching 234,000 tons last year. 89% of those exports were bought by China. The forestry director at Suzano says the company already has more than enough wood for its mills. So, trees from more remote locations are being put up for sale.
Brazil is not used to export eucalyptus until now. What we have been seeing that the market, the whole market, the world market, it's looking for more wood in the world. People from China, people from Europe, for example, and they are trying to find out if we can export logs to them. People are reducing the deforestation, for example, in Asia, in other countries. So they are starting using planted forests because it's really sustainable.
The Chinese are the main buyers of Brazilian cellulose, and still it's not enough to feed China's increasing demand for the product. So now Chinese companies are also buying more eucalyptus logs from Brazil to produce the cellulose pulp in their own plants and use the wood for other purposes too, like construction. The director of Brazil's Association of Wood Producers says the country has the experience and the inventory to fulfill demand.
Brazil has 27 states, and in at least 16 of them, we have planted forests, mostly eucalyptus, but also pine trees and some other species. So it seems to me that our capacity to supply our own needs and cope with international demand is assured.
It takes 7 years for a planted eucalyptus tree to be ready for harvest. It's a long-term investment, but one that can pay off if China's demand for planted wood continues to grow. Paulo Cabral, CGTN, Salesópolis, Brazil.
And finally, a look at the currencies. The Kenyan shilling is expected to firm up, helped by tightening liquidity in the money markets and inflows from offshore investors buying government debt. The Ugandan shilling, however, is forecast to weaken on the back of increased dollar demand from importers and commercial banks. And with that, we come to the end of Global Business tonight. We welcome your feedback. Send it to the contacts on the screen and follow us on our digital media platform. I'm Peninah Karibe. Thank you for watching.